So the next article I wanted to take a look at is entitled Hate Preacher. I don't know what a pandemic is, but COVID-19 is not a pandemic. This is by Hemant Mehta on the Friendly Atheist website, so let's give it a read and see what it has to say. Last week, Christian hate preacher Greg Locke tweeted that a CNN reporter had come by his church to film a segment. He said it was going to be a hit piece, which is usually conservative Christians speak for. They asked me normal questions, and that's persecution. So this is a tweet from Greg Locke. I don't know if you guys know who this dude is, but he is basically an extremist hate preacher on par with Steven Anderson of the NIFB. I would say that they're pretty close to equals in this whole thing. Greg Locke is just as bad as Steven Anderson. So he tweets this out. So CNN just left our church. A short interview turned into a 45-minute smackdown about our church remaining open during COVID and my refusal to take a vaccine. It will be a hit piece without question. Who fucking cares? Who cares if it's a hit piece? Let me explain how cults work, because this guy is actually the leader of a cult. I have looked into him and I've been following him for years, like 5 years. Since the beginning of YouTube, I've been following him. There is a social cost to cults. The lower the social cost is, the more people you'll bring in. Or at least the lower the upfront social cost or financial cost. So Scientology is very expensive to get into. You have to pay a ton of money to join Scientology. Jehovah's Witnesses have a lower social cost and no financial cost to join. They don't really spring the crazy shit on you until, say, a year into studying. They gradually push it on you over a long period of time, so you're more willing to accept it. There's a high social cost with some groups and a lower social cost with others. The lower the social cost, the easier it is to bring people into the cult. In the case of Pastor Greg Locke, there's a high upfront social cost. He is a hate preacher. He is an extreme Republican. He's a COVID-denying, anti-vax nutcase. A Trump-supporting nutcase. So the fact that CNN is running a quote-unquote hit piece on this guy is irrelevant. It means nothing in the grand scheme of things. This isn't going to turn people away from his church. Anybody of sound mind wouldn't join the church in the first place. The only thing it's going to do is draw attention to this church as a group that agrees with certain people's politics. I can just about guarantee you he's not bringing in many new members right now. But when this CNN hit piece goes out, people are going to see it. I mean, the extremists are going to see it, and they're going to be like, huh, you know, I'm anti-vax too, and I don't think the pandemic is real either, and I'm an anti-masker too. And they're going to donate to this guy. Having a hit piece come out about you by CNN, in this guy's specific case, can only help him. Let's keep reading. This is Hemant Mehta speaking. What I couldn't figure out immediately was what that normal question would be. Did reporter Ellie Reeve ask him why he opposed masks? Why he didn't care about the increasing COVID death count? What would it take for him to listen to the scientists? Turns out it was much, much simpler than any of those. I'm guessing, before knowing what the question was, I'm going to assume that it may not have even been a hit piece. I don't know. But he needs that persecution. He needs to look persecuted. He needs to fuel the persecution complex. Needs to make people think that he's hated for unjust reasons. That doesn't bring new people in because, you know, any person of sound mind can see how absolutely fucking outrageous this is, but it will increase enthusiasm for the people who already support him. The lead CNN tweeted, in Wilson County, Tennessee, conservative pastor Greg Locke resists wearing a mask and has no plans to take a COVID-19 vaccine. There's no pandemic, he tells Ellie Reeve, the reporter. I'm 44 years old. We've not had one in my lifetime. This is not it, he adds. So this is Hemant Mehta speaking. After Locke denied that we were in the midst of a pandemic, Reeve asked him to explain himself. Locke, I'm saying the sickness is real. I'm saying the pandemic is not. Reeve, I don't understand what you mean when you say pandemic's not real. Locke, the pandemic is not real. Reeve, but what do you think a pandemic is? Locke, not COVID-19. Reeve, but what do you think a pandemic is? Locke, it is no pandemic. Publicist, off screen, I think we've stuck on the pandemic question too many times. Reeve, well, why can't you answer it? Locke, it's ridiculous. I did. There's no pandemic. COVID-19 is not a pandemic. Reeve, but what is a pandemic then? Locke, not what we're experiencing. I'm 44 years old. We've not had one in my lifetime, so I don't know, and this is not it. She wasn't asking him a hard fucking question. Are you serious? Why isn't this a pandemic? Seriously, why is this not a pandemic? What makes this not a pandemic, but the 1918 flu was? What's the difference? I don't understand. Back to Hemant Mehta. I don't know, and this is not it. What a perfect encapsulation of the MAGA cult in action. They hate something they don't understand. It's a good point. Locke doesn't know what a pandemic is, but he's absolutely certain that the thing he can't explain isn't happening. Oh, and by the way, he refuses to take a vaccine for it. And if his church members follow suit, so be it. That doesn't surprise me, but it's extremely disappointing. One thing that I don't really understand is people's reactions to the vaccine and the conspiracy theories that come out about it. Like, people are convinced that there's going to be a microchip implanted in them when they get the vaccine. What brought people to that fucking absurd conclusion? As if they don't carry around a smartphone that tracks all that shit for them already. Why would anybody want to implant a microchip? First of all, a microchip is way smaller and would not be able to collect as much data as a smartphone. At best, it would track your location. And even then, I don't think it would be very good at it. You already carry a phone with you everywhere. You already put on Facebook what you went and did that day. Why would anybody need a microchip? It just gets so fucking weird with these people. Anyway, let's keep reading. The whole exchange is very similar to Christians who reject evolution without being able to properly explain it. Their ignorance becomes unearned pride. It's a good point. Like, once you actually understand how evolution works, it's so basic and straightforward. You just have to understand a few key points. You have to understand that there is gene duplication. You have to understand that there are mutations. And you have to understand that as generations go along, they pass on favorable genes. They pass on all their genes, and the populations that have the best genes, best suited for that environment, they survive the best. Those are the only things you have to understand about evolution to realize that it's just a fact. That's what it is. But Christians refuse to even understand how it works because I guess they're afraid that they'll leave Christianity if they read about it? I don't know. The bizarre thing about it is the leaders in the Christian community seem to understand. They seem to, in many cases. Kent Hovind has had it explained to him enough times how evolution works that there's no way in hell he doesn't understand it. He has to be denying one of the premises that I just laid out. Either he's denying that genes duplicate, or he's denying that populations with certain genes reproduce more efficiently than populations without those genes, or he's denying the fact that mutations happen. Each one of those premises can be independently proven. We can look at a microscope and watch each of these things take place. Except, of course, the natural selection part, the last one that I mentioned before. We can't actually watch that happen under a microscope, but we can watch it happen. Well, we've watched it happen to E. coli under a microscope, so I guess you can watch it under a microscope. We can watch it happen in any population of living things. I don't understand where these people's heads are at sometimes. Anyway, let's keep reading. Reeve was right to follow up repeatedly. For all his bluster, Locke doesn't have the goods to back it up. He's too ignorant to know what he's talking about, but he knows that if he speaks loudly and confidently and in all caps on Twitter, his followers will be gullible enough to think he's some sort of religious leader when he's really just a con artist leading people to their doom. Reeve, by the way, is an excellent reporter who gave us a behind-the-scenes look at what white supremacists are doing in Charlottesville. She has experience dealing with confident, ignorant men who spew hate. This interview is just an extension of that. Fascinating. Well, you guys should check that out because Reeves seems pretty on point to me. I actually believe I know what he's talking about with the white supremacists in Charlottesville. I think I know about that because I listened to an interview about it recently, but that's really interesting. Another thing is, I've actually listened to Greg Locke's speeches many times, and if the guy is skilled at one thing and no other, it is talking without saying anything. He'll just keep going and going and going with no pauses in between. No pauses. It's like one thought leads into the next seamlessly, and it just keeps going like that for an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours. I don't know how he does it, truthfully. Anyway, guy's a monster, and I'm glad he got called out by CNN here. But honestly, getting called out like this just fuels his persecution complex even more. It needs to be done, though. It needs to be done.